And now, it's time for The Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin.
Hello, listeners. Happy New Year. I hope 2026 is off to a good start for all of you. Did you have a good holiday? Did you get any books for Christmas? In my last episode, I teased that I had a big announcement, and in case you missed it on social media, I have signed a 2-book contract with Ashbury Lane, which is a division of Whitefire Publishing. My historical romance has found a home and is on its way to you as the reader. I am so excited about this. My first deadline has already come and gone, and my manuscript is now with my editor. And so this is just a huge step, and I thank you for being a part of my journey. And if you would like to continue to keep up with updates about when the book is going to come out and different things like that, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at author Erin Mifflin, or visit my website, authorerinmifflin.com, to sign up for my newsletter, and then you'll be the first to know of any news. I can't wait to share these stories with you. Today's guest is Kerri Tracht. Kerri is a wife, mother, grandmother, and author of The Long Road Home. Kerri loves Jesus and coffee, and I'm excited to talk with her today. Hello, Kerri, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's good to talk with you. Can you tell us about your book, The Long Road Home?
The Long Road Home is a story, I don't want to give too much away, but it's about a woman who is taking a literal road trip with her father and sibling, a recreation really of a trip that she took as a child, and with her father, who is kind of facing maybe the end of his life. And he wants to recreate a journey that he took with his children and his family years before. She's very reluctant to take it because she has been estranged from him for a very long time. And so it's basically a journey of forgiveness. And it turns out it's not just about a family, but it's a journey for her marriage and for herself. And I wrote it really to be a reflection of the spiritual relationship that we have, and the whole journey of forgiveness and what it takes for reconciliation and redemption in someone's life. It has multi-layers, and I tell it also too, and not really dual time, but in a series of the current day journey as well as the past journey, so you can see the layers of her life in the past and in the present.
Yes, so the road trip is a main part of the story. Do you enjoy road trips yourself?
I've taken a few. The actual trip it starts in North Carolina and ends in Washington State, is one that actually my family took when I was a child, 13 years old actually. My father was also in the military. He was a special forces soldier. And when we came back from Germany, I was 13. I had a sister who was 16 and an 11-year-old sister, and then a very young sister, and a dog, and my parents. And we landed in New York. My father purchased a brand new Ford LTD station wagon and a pop-up tent trailer. And we drove down the East Coast, visited family in North Carolina, where we were all from, and then did sort of a horseshoe. Came down through Arkansas, Texas, and then all the way up to Washington State, where my dad was stationed. And so we made that same trip that I have the family take. So we did that, and it took about 3 to 4 weeks. So I did take that. And then as a parent myself, my husband and I have 3 kids. We did multiple trips across the country. I will stop here and say it was not with a camp trailer. We did it in an RV, which if anyone does any camping, they know there's a big difference in camping and RVing.
Right.
I'm an RVer, not a camper. So we did that multiple times. When my children were ready for college, we had a 5th wheel, and we made the cross-country trip from Washington to Florida about 4 times. So I have done my share of road trips. I have one son with his wife and 4 children live in Ohio. So we road trip up there. So yes, I do. Now, I will say the road trips now in my life are quite different than they were as a child or as a young adult. They are in shorter spurts. We stop much more and do much more hotels than we do camping. So,
Yes.
But yeah, I do like a good road trip.
And so I'm sure that you relied a lot on your own memories then, since you did take this exact road trip as a child yourself.
Yes, actually I did. Now, I will say I did have to do a little bit of research because the road trip that I took when I was 13, it was easy to call up those memories, but what it would look like today is very different than what it looked like, say, in the 70s. So that was fun to research how different things would be in the 70s, say, than they would in the 2000s. It would be very different where you would stop and what you would eat. And because we literally would pull off on the side of the road and eat, bologna sandwiches on the tailgate of the car.
Right.
And the interstates are much different today than they were back then.
So the father Alex in your story has early Alzheimer's. It's so hard when a family faces this disease. Do you have personal experience dealing with it among your family or friends?
Yes, as a matter of fact, my dad did have early onset Alzheimer's. A lot of it was due to some of the fallout from his time in Vietnam, the early 60s. And it's a very difficult thing to talk about with people. And I think most families have been touched by it in some degree. My husband's stepfather just recently passed away, and he actually went deeper into it than my dad. My dad actually passed away from heart disease before he went too deep into it. But I didn't want the focus of the journey to be about Alex's Alzheimer's, but what I wanted to really focus on was the frailty of life and in the value in not having regrets. And I think dealing with my own father with it, I think that was what I learned
Mm-hmm.
was how precious the time you have, whether it's the past, the present, or having the future. And I think we touch on that some in the conversations. And in fact, it was very emotional to write because some of the conversations that I put into the book were literally conversations that I had with my own dad. And people have asked me, is this your story? And I think sometimes as writers, a lot of what goes into a story are things that are from us, but I was careful to not make it my story. It is fiction.
Right.
And in fact, my first few drafts of the story were written in third person, but an editor I was working with pushed me really hard to rewrite it in first person to make her more accessible emotionally. So I did, but I didn't want people to think that I was Deanna. And she said, it doesn't matter, Kerri, people are going to think it's you anyway. so, so I did rewrite it, and it was good because I was able to, I think, bring in more emotion and make her more accessible than when I wrote it in the third person. So,
Mm.
um, but there were parts that were very tough because it was so real, and I did experience a lot of the same things. So.
Yes. And I think, as writers, we do always put some of ourselves into each book. And, it
Mm-hmm.
just depends on what it is. But yes, sometimes that touches a little closer to home.
Yes.
Now, one of the things you mention in the book's blurb is that the characters have a spiritual renewal through the course of the story. Why is it important to you to include a spiritual component to your novels?
I would say that because without the calling of God on my life to write, and without his gifting me, I wouldn't be doing this. In fact, I think I put it on my website that when you just write for a vocation is one thing, but when it's a calling, it becomes something totally different. And I do believe that when there's a purpose behind your words besides just entertaining, it becomes much more important. And I do always try to write, whether it's my blog or my newsletter or my stories, I try to write faith forward. And I do believe that in every story I write, whether it's overtly stated or whether it's subtle, that I try to put the picture that God's hand is always there. You can, whether you see it or not, he's always working. And I think that's kind of the story behind the story in The Long Road Home, is that even when you can't see him, even when you weren't aware of him, God was always there. God was always working. And I think that's been the story of my life and sort of what I wanted to get across, and probably will be the driving theme in all my books is his hand is always there, even in the most mundane parts of our life.
Yes, and that's such a life lesson, that we can all see in our own lives too.
Hmm.
Now, from reading the blurb and your own bio, it's clear that family is a very important part of your life. Can you tell us a little bit about your family?
Yeah, my husband and I, as I mentioned, we have 3 kids. They are all grown and married with their own children now. In fact, we had 3 kids, and I often joke and say that we've raised a very competitive family. I have 2 sons and a daughter, and they're so competitive that when they had children, it was like we were playing a hand of poker because they all said, "I see your 3 and raise you 1." So they each had 4 children. So, so I have 12 grandkids. So we are running heavy on the boys. We have 7 grandsons and 5 granddaughters. It's probably the best part of our life so far is having these grandkids. And they range from age, the youngest is 4, and the oldest one, she is a freshman in college. So 18 to 4 years old. And it's just, it's been glorious. The times I look back to when I was raising my children, I homeschooled all the way through graduation. And the days that I sat with my kids in the bonus room of our house thinking, I don't have to do this. I could just pack you children up and drive you to a school, and this is too hard. I prevailed, and I am so glad I did. I wouldn't do anything different.
Mm-hmm.
I stayed home, raised them, and I was rewarded with 12 nearly perfect grandchildren. So it it's great. And now I look back and I think I've always wanted to write, but I set it on a back burner to homeschool my kids, to work with my husband. We were in lay youth ministry. He ran his own business, and I just felt like I just didn't have time for it. And I admire women who work and raise kids and write books at the same time. I don't know how they do it, but I think God was holding me back for this time, that this was the time to do it. And I feel like he's not done with me. And this was the time that he set aside for me to do what I'm doing. And I'm really, really having a good time.
That's wonderful. I know there was a particular moment in my life when I was like, you know what? I think I'd like to give this writing thing a try because I've always had stories that were on my heart. But then there was just one particular moment, like you said, you were talking about, we have all these things in our lives that we're doing and that are important. But I had one thing that I was doing in my life and it kind of went away. Like the season for that was over. And when I was looking to the Lord, like, what do you want to fill this time that I've used for other things and now it's available? I was like, you know what? I think maybe it's time to give this writing thing a try. Did you have a moment like that?
It's funny because I always thought when my children graduated and went to college, moved out, I thought, I'm going to go back to work. Before I got married, I worked in an attorney's office. And all my sisters worked. I have 4 sisters. We're a family of 5 girls. I was the only one who stayed home. And I often thought they looked at me and thought, oh, she probably just can't get a job. She's not smart enough. So I always felt like I just didn't do anything. And I thought, well, I'm going to get a job. But then by the time it came around to that, my husband and I were just settled into this routine. And I had other things I did. And then I knew I wanted to write. On one of my blogs, I write how I ran into a junior high school teacher when I was a young mom. She taught me 8th grade English, and I was much younger. And she asked me if I remembered a short story I wrote for her class. And I was like, nope, I don't. She said, well, I do. She said, I asked you if I could keep it, and I still have it. And I said, really? She said, I do. She said, in fact, I read it to my class every year as the perfect short story.
Oh,
And I
wow.
was stunned. And she said, and Kerri, she said, I do hope you're still writing. You were born for it. And I tucked that away. And starting at that point, I thought, I'm going to write. And I started writing Bible studies for our church. I wrote for our church newsletter. I just began to dabble. And I kept thinking from that moment on, I will write one day. I will write one day. I'm going to write. And then it was just a few years ago, I'd say probably 10 years ago, there was a message or devotion, I don't know, but I read it on the 3 servants and how the one buried his talent and the other 2 invested. And it's like the Lord spoke to my heart and he said, you're the 3rd servant.
Mm.
You're burying your talent. And I thought, I am. I'm going to stand before him one day, and I have journals and books and notebooks. I literally had two huge binders of two Bible studies I had written and just stuck in a closet. And I thought, I'm going to be accountable one day for this calling and this gift. And I thought, I have no excuse. It's time to do something. So I took a couple courses, and one day I thought, if you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it? So at that point, I thought, I'm going to write this. I have all these people living rent free in my head. I thought they're coming out. So I wrote my first book, went to a writer's conference, hired an editor, and turned the story into a novel. And here I am.
That is wonderful. Do you have any more stories that you're working on?
Yes, I've started two new books. One I set aside because I hit a wall and I realized I was writing it from the wrong voice. And I started my next one, and I'm about 40% through my first rough draft. And so I'm hoping I can get that one finished up, and I'd like to get that one published this summer because I found out that I'm probably a self-published writer. I think that's where I'm at, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. Is I like self-publishing. I like being in control. I do. I enjoy the whole process. I loved it. So I don't feel like I have to be traditionally published. I'm not looking for the huge sales and the big platform. I like how I've done what I've done. So I think that's what I'm going to keep doing until God leads me different. But yes, I do. The next book is about three generation of women, and I'm telling their story, each of their stories together as they weave their lives together. And it's ironically, it's another story about coming home together and finding their lives weaving together. So tentatively, I've titled it Butterflies in the Rain, but that could change.
Oh, yes. Now, I see from your blog that you and your contractor husband are building a house. Can you tell us how that's going?
Oh, we're just starting. We purchased a little piece of property just down the street. Well, we purchased it first, then my kids bought a house a few doors down. And my husband has been a builder since he started framing when he was 15 years old. And we have, other than the house we're in now, we've built every place we lived in. And we've talked about building this house for probably 8 years, but we just haven't done it for us. You know, the shoemaker's kids go barefoot.
Right.
And the story of us. So we have finally gotten around to breaking ground and building our own house again. And I sort of think we're hoping this will be the last one we build. And it's on a cute little lake. Now, lakes in Florida aren't usually very pleasant, but this one is spring fed and it's clear and you can see almost, 10 or 12 feet.
Mm.
And so far, we've not seen any alligators, so we're happy about that. They say there's one that comes over once in a while during mating season, but he doesn't stay. But there's lots of fish in it, and it's quiet, and I think it's just right for two old people to sit on the dock and watch the sunset. So that's what we're hoping to do.
Well, good. That property sounds lovely. It sounds like a great place to have your grandkids come visit.
Yes, in fact, this is what's actually funny. My firstborn grandchild, like I said, she just started college. She's going locally, and she has asked if when we get our house built, can she move in with us? So
Oh.
she wants to live with us. We're like, okay. But cute story, when she was about 9 years old, she got birthday money, and she went in and bought, she bought one of those necklaces. One half says best, the other half says friend.
Uh-huh.
And she spent her birthday money. She came out of the store and she opened it up and she put her half on and she handed me the other half. I said, Madison, you're supposed to give this to your best friend. She goes, Nani, you are my best friend. And I just said, oh my goodness. I thought, well, I'm going to cherish this because she's 9 and she'll grow out of this pretty soon.
Yeah.
And she just graduated from high school last year, and we helped her buy her class ring. And so she got this companion ring with it that just had the year on it. She said, and she came to me, she goes, I got my class ring. I said, I know, I saw it. It's really cool. And she goes, and I also got this companion ring. I said, that's pretty cool. And she hands it to me. And I said, why are you're giving this to me? She goes, well, yeah. She goes, Nani, you're my best friend. So, of course, I cried. But after all this time, she still calls me her best friend. And this last writers conference I went to, she went with me because she is an aspiring writer as well. So I've been very blessed that my first grandchild is wanting to be a writer as well. She wants to live with me in my house, and so I am incredibly blessed. And so I've always said grandkids are God's reward to you for not shoving your teenagers out of a moving car. So
That is just precious about your granddaughter. I love that.
so she's pretty special, and I'm going to enjoy it until she chooses otherwise. We cherish the time with them.
Yes. Now, you also posted on your blog about your word of the year for 2026. Can you share about that with our listeners?
Yes, I'm notorious for forgetting things I do. And last year, I was not joking when I said I said this is my word for the year, and then later I'm like, oh, what was that word? I forgot. So this year it's hope. And I know that last year it was a good year. I know everyone kept saying how, oh, I'll be so glad 2025 is over. I'm like, no, I was grateful for 2025. We had some good things happen, but I I believe that hope, our world is so many people are struggling to have a purpose and struggling to find a reason to go on. And my word is hope, that we do have hope and we have purpose. And I think, especially at my age, I joke about it, but my demographic for the women I want to write for and the women that I see as who I write to, a podcaster and a person I listen to a lot calls it finding your Timothy. The one person you write to is the woman who feels like no one writes for her, that all of the characters, all the heroines of the book are young people who have their whole life ahead of them and have their stories not written. And I want to write to the women who feel like their story's over and no one's writing to them, but they still have a story to tell. And I think I'm living proof of that. I should be settling down and enjoying what life had, what life gave me, as opposed to I'm gearing up for what life still has. That there's still hope. There's hope for me to have a purpose, and there's life yet ahead, and I can still offer hope for others. And that's what I want my books to reflect, that there's hope. Always there's hope.
Yes. That's a wonderful heartbeat for your audience, for the ones that you are writing for. Is there a scripture that has been meaningful to you recently?
Well, it kind of goes along with what I just said, and that is that he who has called you will be faithful to complete it.
Yes.
And I think that is the one that I'm going to hold on to this year. If he called me, then he will finish it and he will complete it. And when I get up and I sit down, I get up early and write, like 5 o'clock this morning was when I sat down in front of my laptop. And it's like, if he called you, he will do it. He will complete it. And he who has called you will be faithful to complete it. And that's what I have to always remember. And that's probably been my verse as long as I can remember. And I always hold on to that. He saved me, he called me, and he will finish what he started. And that's always resonated with me from the time I was a child. And I think that probably is, I think I'll have, if I die before my husband, he has to put that on my tombstone. He finished it. He did.
Yes. Now, how can readers connect with you?
I think the best way is I do have a website, and that will lead them to both my blog and to where they could find my book. But if they want to connect with me personally, I would say going to my Facebook page and following me there, which is just so simple. It's my name, Kerri Tracht. That would be the way to connect with me personally, is to follow or friend me on Facebook. But my blog and my book both can be found on my website, which is kerritracht.com. And there are links to everything there as far as finding my blog, and you can also connect to my book from there as well. Somewhere on there too, I do have a newsletter they can sign up for, and that is also on my website.
Listeners, please do go to kerritracht.com or find Kerri Tracht on Facebook to learn more about Kerri and her stories. Let me spell her name for you. It's Kerri Tracht. So Kerri Tracht. And if you have already enjoyed Kerri's books and are looking for something similar, as I was talking to Kerri, some names came to mind. Sarah Brensvold, she also writes multi-generational stories that are very similar in vein. She has one that is also about a road trip called The Atlas of Untold Stories, but I recommend all of Sarah's books, and Katie Pownner's as well. Hers often have a multi-generational component to them, and she is just a fantastic author. So Sarah Brensvold and Katie Pownner are two that I would highly recommend alongside Kerri's book here. And I have actually interviewed Sarah and Katie before, so if you would like to listen to those, you can find them on my YouTube channel. So if you look up author Erin Mifflin and just look for Sarah Brensvold and Katie Pownner. I'm looking forward to bringing you more interviews soon. You can stay up to date on who I'll be talking to next by following me on Facebook or Instagram at author Erin Mifflin, or signing up for my monthly newsletter at authorerinmifflin.com. Until next time, happy reading!
Join us next week for another episode of The Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin. If you'd like to find out more about author Erin Mifflin, visit her Facebook and Instagram accounts.